This week on the Eldritch Lorecast.
2 vice presidents down.
Speculation, everybody have a good day.
D&D was going to move to what they call a, quote, franchise model.
Like they're kind of dissolving the idea of a team that works on D&D.
Well, Darrington Press is taking the next step along the path of becoming a bigger publisher.
It's not a job that I would hire a game designer for necessarily.
No. What will be your Infinity Saga, you know?
All that and more right now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Eldritch Lorecast. What are we, Dael Kingsmill?
We're the number one podcast in all the realms.
Are we all Dael?
That's exactly right. And James, hey, who's not here this week?
Why, it's our valiant leader, Ben Byrne.
He is not. So I, Shawn, when I'm hosting this week, and joining us for like the billionth time, it seems, is who?
Do I say my own name? I'm Arun Smith.
Yes,
hello,
you do.
all you beautiful viewers.
Wow, talk about a hot seat.
Whew,
I asked you to remember your name.
I forgot it a couple times.
I actually wrote it down just in case, because sometimes I get a little weird.
No worries.
But we are the Eldritch Lorecast. We are leaderless today, but we are still going to persevere by starting with this opening question. I want y'all to think about popular media and popular culture. Think about a D&D monster type, i.e. aberration, beast, celestial construct, etc., etc. And then I want you to think of the most iconic monster, creature, being of that type that you can think of in pop culture.
Okay, this one might be a little bit controversial. I'm thinking of the construct, Frankenstein's monster.
Hey!
You went there too, Dael? Flesh golem. Good. I think when I think of construct, I think of robots and metal and, stone and stuff like that. But no, I think it's gotta be the Frankenstein.
Okay. I would go a different way. I would go a different way with construct. I think more a flesh golem to me is not a construct because it's flesh. And I thought.
But Shawn, Frankenstein's monster has those bolts in its neck and all that electricity.
It's true. Those bolts make a
little antenna that goes.
Pulling out receipts.
Oh, he's pulled out his book. We've gone downhill already.
It's bold of you to say that a flesh golem is not a construct, Shawn. When it says
I know indeed
right here,
it is.
We all live in our own
But who do you think is the most iconic construct, Shawn?
That's where I was falling down because my mind kept going to Frankenstein. But so I went Transformers.
C-3PO. But Optimus Prime, the Transformers are not constructs. They are just of an alien species where they are like an organic mechanic.
They're borderline like
thing.
They're giants in the way that a Warforged is a humanoid.
Yeah.
I personally, because aberrations is always my favorite and it's one of the easiest to cling on to. I think the anomaly from Annihilation fits the idea of an aberration the best. Something that doesn't know anything about our reality and naturally chooses to learn in whatever random way it thinks is going to give it a chance at survival.
I feel like I cheated. I sort of picked Undead, and I feel like it's too easy to go to Count Dracula.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah.
It is too easy, Dael. Try again.
Try again.
You guys are going open license
Oberon.
monsters.
Okay, let's talk about Dracula then. Bela Lugosi aside.
I don't want to.
Nosferatu.
Yes, you have to. What's like the best representation of a vampire type creature aside from that obviously iconic Bela Lugosi term?
Well, I mean,
good things about Sinners. Still need to see.
Also, how can we go past Nosferatu?
Is the new one Nosferatu as well? I forget.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, new or old? Who can put down a crinkly old paper thin skinned goblin looking?
I'm sitting right here, Dael.
Who's obsessed with light switches, apparently.
Did any of you see the movie Shadow? Was it Shadow of the Vampire? John Malkovich plays a filmmaker. Willem Dafoe played what everyone thought was an actor playing the Nosferatu when he was really a Nosferatu. If you have not seen that movie, For me, that is the best representation of a vampire, although in a bit of a campy sort of way, given the material. Absolutely amazing.
I would throw out anyone in the courts from the Castlevania Netflix series. I think they cover a pretty wide concept of like what vampires might want with their long lives. Is it Bill Skarsgård who plays the new Nosferatu?
Oh,
yes. Yeah. Or no, I think is it Bill or is it Stellan
Skarsgård? One of them. It's one of the.
It's one of the Skarsgårds for sure.
Let's look this up. Nosferatu. Who was it?
One of the Skarsgårds also did.
It was
Bill. Was he also the one who was Pennywise? In
yes,
the new?
I think he was the clown.
Yeah, okay, that's why.
And he's Murderbot, I believe, in a Netflix series right now.
Damn. Okay. All right, Bill.
He's a little monster.
He's doing some work. All right, I'm going to throw one more out at you. Plant.
Okay, Audrey too, of course.
Oh, that's really good. That's really good.
Oh, from Little Shop of Horrors.
Little Shop of
Horrors.
Horrors.
I'm a mean green mother from outer space.
Oh,
yeah. Okay. I didn't know its name, but I was thinking that too.
I was gonna say Swamp Thing, but I do love me some Audrey too.
Yeah.
I was thinking.
I went right to Audrey too. Swamp Thing. That's a good one. That gets there. That gets there.
Are the pod people from B movies in the 50s, are those plants or are they aberrations?
I think they're aliens.
What about the Triffids? Do they count as plants or?
Is that the oil that you put on French fries? Oh, that's truffles. Never mind.
Just goes to show that sometimes a taxonomy can break down in a way that gets nerds to argue on the internet.
Is Optimus Prime a construct? This week on the Eldritch Lorecast.
We will actually come back to this topic in a little different way if we get to the question in our listener question section. But first, we've got some news to get to, and I want to get y'all's take on this. We reported a couple weeks ago that Jess Lanzillo had left Wizards of the Coast. We debated what that meant, how important that was. And we learned earlier this week that she has a new home at White Wolf as the creative director. And so that was, okay, she had a job. She went to that job. Great. And then we got the news that Dan Rawson, the senior vice president and general manager of D&D, has changed jobs. He now works for Hasbro directly instead of Wizards as the general manager of the direct-to-consumer business section of Hasbro. And so that's 2 vice presidents down with its short time span. And then we get the news that Dan Ayoub has announced that he has been named senior vice president as head of D&D franchise. And with that news came the additional news that D&D was going to move to what they call a, quote, franchise model. And without that being defined, the internet went crazy as it does about what that means. Everything from D&D is dying to they're going to start working like McDonald's. And so I just wanted to get y'all's take on all of that news and this whole franchise model discussion.
The franchise model thing is what confuses me the most. And I might talk to anyone who has any insight on this as to what the heck they mean by that. Because, when someone says a franchise model, I think of they lend out a franchise, offer a franchise to people who are willing to pay some kind of licensing fee or something like that in order to run an aspect of the business for them. And fast food franchising is the most common way we see it, where McDonald's or Subway might own all the proprietary meats and buns and things like that, and they sell it to a franchisor who operates out of some real estate that McDonald's owns, right? McDonald's is a real estate company, not a food company, because of how they franchise.
We watched that movie.
And when you put it that way, it makes sense, right? D&D is an IP, not a game. That seems to be the prevailing attitude of Wizards, and it has been for years now. And if we follow, that's true and this is true, then together that gives the impression that a lot of D&D game work is going to be farmed out. But that seems so beyond the pale of what I expect, right? The D&D development team is hiring. They hire all the time. They've still got all of these great game designers on staff. The actuality of the situation does not seem to match what all the words seem to be implying that it is. So is there any more insight, or is that all we actually know?
I don't know about insight that I can offer, but certainly, I mean, Yeah, speculation. I certainly agree with some of the folks in chat and people that I've seen chatting about it online. There's a bit of trickiness here in the way that we see the word franchise used typically just in society right now is more attached to the film industry, right? You have film franchises, which, has a commonality in terms of business, but I think ultimately does look quite different. And so I've seen the suggestion around the internet that maybe they mean this with regards more to their media and video game branches as they're building those up. But I don't know anything more substantial.
In a tiny pinch of doing light business research, I know that a lot of market studies say that a franchise model as opposed to an independent IP holder is more sustainable. It's less risky. And it seems like they could go in the direction of sort of copying DM Drive-Thru, if that's the name of the website, where they offer a lot of people the ability to create works under their umbrella and then siphon minor amounts from it, like Amazon, like PayPal, just anything that lets them hold the IP without selling it, but without making any mistakes themselves when it comes to actual usage of the IP. That's, again, just speculation, but from my observations, it seems like that might be the route they want to go.
Some of the discourse that I've seen, including people who have been in high positions under D&D at Wizards, is that what this does is it brings into a single team a lot of people that often work for separate teams at Wizards. So instead of there being a licensing branch that has its own vice president and its own system, the people that work on D&D licensing will now come under a single vice president who oversees the entirety of D&D. So whereas before you might have licensing, you might have marketing, you might have design, you might have video games, you might have other branches that all answer to their own people. And there needs to be coordination at the vice president level on down. And it makes it harder to integrate efforts. That this brings everything D&D related under one person who then has more authority, more power, and more cohesion, supposedly, to the projects. So they can say, rather than going to vice president number 3 and 4 for marketing and for licensing, you are in charge of licensing and marketing. And you work that down through your own reports using business terms to get these projects going. Now, and they've said they've done this before, as recently as 2017 or something. They were under a franchise model. They just didn't call it that, and they didn't report that out, but that was what they did. And then it branched out, and now it's contracted in again to this.
Yeah, I don't pretend to know what all that means, but anything that creates more organization at Wizards, I think, is of enormous value to basically everyone.
Yeah, it seems like it's majorly centralizing everything to just a few staff members who have authoritative say over a lot of stuff. So it seems to me, and if I'm misconstruing this, please let me know, they're kind of dissolving the idea of a team that works on D&D and adding it to a general branch of people who also work for Magic the Gathering or any of these fantasy IPs.
Yeah, it's interesting in the sense of what it means for things like licensing to video games and to entertainment companies, where the decision-making lies more than the actual creative work. But what I heard people say was, well, wouldn't it be nice if we could go back to the days where this is the year of the giants, and we get a giant adventure and a giant source book and a giant comic book and a giant this, that's all giant themed. We've talked about before Baldur's Gate, right? Baldur's Gate, Descent into Avernus was supposed to have come out when Baldur's Gate 3 comes out.
Oh.
And all that went into that failed because Baldur's Gate 3 came out, 5 years later, 6 years later than was expected. So this is something that in theory could work, but also things in theory that could work include capitalism and communism and, lots of other things that in theory sound great. In practice, you never know.
So they're just kind of bundling concepts to see what sticks and what doesn't. Not to bore
That's again, this is all from hearsay on the internet. People who say they're in the know. And then
speculation. Everybody have a good day.
But would any sort of systematic release of products based on a certain theme, would that excite you for D&D?
Oh, yeah. You know, there's a pro and there's a con to this model, right? Which is that if you're not interested in fantasy giants, then Year of Giants means a year where you're not buying any D&D. But if you are absolutely giant maniacal, if you can't get enough of those big boys, then you're buying as much as your budget can sustain. And on top of it all, there's a thing that people have talked about since the launch of 5e back in 2014, which is that the goal of this edition was to unify a fractious D&D culture, right? To have everybody playing the same game, to have everyone talking about the same game. And I think right up until the sort of Dragon Heist Dungeon of the Mad Mage era, everyone was on board with that. Everyone was talking about Tyranny of Dragons, and then Princes of the Apocalypse, and then Out of the Abyss, Tomb Annihilation, Storm King's Thunder, Dragon Heist, right? And then D&D kind of reached this critical mass where the powers that be of its business decided it would make more money if they just published as many books as they possibly could. And that kind of diluted the focus of the game. And I liked it. I liked it when the D&D conversation online was very, not singular, but it was all discussing different aspects of the same broad thing. I thought it was fun. It was a good time.
I like the version of that is just a little bit more in the direction of comic books or maybe even films, where it's like, instead of it being the Year of Giants, you go, this is the event that is happening. It's the ordning. So now we are talking about giants the whole time, but it's built around the idea that this event is happening. The giants are choosing their next king, and that affects everybody. And so then it pulls you in a little bit more, even if you're not, if giants don't capture your imagination, you can still be like, right, but my adventuring party is going to be impacted by this big event that's happening. It doesn't have to literally be something that reaches into your table and punches you in the face, but you could choose to get involved in this thing, and it feels like an exciting sort of kairos. It's like it's happening now. Get in on the fun while it's happening, and choosing a different event to focus on. What will be your Infinity Saga?
There's another challenge to this model that we've seen. Baldur's Gate exemplifies it, but video games make this very hard to pull off. And it's not just Baldur's Gate. The Neverwinter MMO, which I believe is still running, was never on time. It was never wearing the same outfit as the rest of the brand, right? Like the Ravenloft expansion to Neverwinter came out, I think, literally 5 years after Curse of Strahd. It was very scattershot. And that's not Neverwinter's fault. It just takes that long to develop a video game. You look at the way Pokemon does it, right? Pokemon is the platonic ideal of this franchise model done perfectly from a business standpoint. When you look at recent Pokemon games, you can see that in order to keep the games on the same cycle as the trading card game, as the plushies, as the anime, as the trading card game. Did I say trading card game? As all of them, a lot of those Pokemon games, people online, maybe people who are too old to be complaining about this online, but they complain about it because those Pokemon games can get a little threadbare. They can show where the development had to be sprinted to the end, and there was really no way to delay because they had to go out in lockstep with the rest of the system.
And that was my question. Is it a fool's errand to even try to sync up something that will take 7 years after you say it will take 3 video games? Something that can go into development, you think it's going to come out, and then it goes into hiatus, and then it's canceled, then it's reaffirmed, and then it comes out 5 years later. TV shows, movies.
Yeah, I think it's audacious to think that you can sort of make this rigid, constructed form of creativity where you want everyone on your team to be super excited about this one idea that you want to run the whole year with. It's not going to make gold every time. There are people who are not going to be super involved. And I think I'm a big proprietor of biodiversity. Like, even as a creator on YouTube, when I'm making a video, I don't want to be beholden to the current news of what's happening, like what the current releases are, because that's not creative. That's streamlined. That's very much just almost railroaded in terms of creativity. I think that a lot of random stuff should continue to be scattershot so that people understand that this is a venue or an avenue that you can explore and do whatever you want with. Not just giants. It's not a game about giants. It's a game about everything and adventurers running in a countless number of different bizarre worlds. And I think more examples of that would encourage people to be more creative themselves, as opposed to doing this, beat by beat model of this is what we are all doing. It's kind of like herding.
The good news is I don't think that it has to be all or nothing. If they were to, again, we're swimming in speculation. But if they were to do something like this, you could pick and choose. You could have, the Batman comic play into whatever the current DC crisis is, but still have Detective Comics be its own, sort of side stuff that doesn't even touch on it. It's just kind of covering your bases. It is, in a way, decentralizing in order to gain stability, because even if one thing fails, the other thing might not.
It's all about stability and growth. Capitalism.
Well, speaking about stability and growth, have I got news for you? We've been talking about Daggerheart and Darrington Press. Well, Darrington Press is taking the next step along the path of becoming a bigger publisher by hiring a developmental editor. This 5 days ago went up onto LinkedIn, and it's already been not taken down, but said we're no longer accepting applications. So within 5 days, they are reviewing applications now. They were seeking a meticulous and creatively minded developmental editor to join the Darrington Press development team. This role is critical in shaping and refining content at the structural level, ensuring consistency with source material, alignment with brand guidelines, and adherence to specific game mechanics with a focus on Daggerheart. The developmental editor will collaborate with writers and third-party partners to elevate content quality, provide thoughtful editorial feedback, and serve as a key guardian of both lore integrity and gameplay clarity. That's a serious job in the industry. That's not your fly-by-night, we're just going to put out a book. This is like getting into the big leagues there with that sort of hire.
It's also a labor-intensive offer. It's like you have a lot on your plate going into that.
Yeah, I reviewed that job description really closely because I was trying to decide for myself if I should apply for it. And the more I looked at it, the more I thought this is not a game developer job. Not really. This is, it's franchise level. It's about all the stuff we've been talking about. It's about consistency across, who knows how many products. I wouldn't even liken it to Jeremy's role at Wizards, right? As a managing editor. I think it's different from that. Managing editor would keep all the books, all the different game offerings unified using the same rules language. But when you start bringing in third parties and licensors and franchisees, this is a very, it's not a job that I would hire a game designer for necessarily.
No. It seems to me like they want a very passionate and interested bookkeeper, almost like someone who loves everything they've created and has the type of mind that can catalog and remember all of this so that they can cross-reference everything as they release it, which is not something I could do.
That was the interesting thing to me about this, because there's sort of a standard flow in game design with the process, and it's tweaked from company to company. It generally is like the designer or the writer. It goes through a project lead, and then it goes through development. And if it's a small project, it may skip development and go straight to an editor. So when I saw development editor, I'm thinking, checking rules, checking to make sure that the rules that you've made work, or that the rules that you've made are being shown in adventures. And then just started getting into the lore and the third party stuff. And that's almost a separate job. That's something that takes a different skill set than a really, really good developmental editor. And in my experience, a lot of the developmental editors that I've worked with who are the best would not be great writers.
Mm.
They are great developmental editors. Some people can do both, but the really like top notch, they see, they can scan a paragraph and notice the rules problems right away. Those sorts of folks are very hard to come by. This is asking for that plus. So it's interesting in that sense for me.
You got to have a certain type of brain to do that work, right? I think about the guild navigators from Dune. You've got to be a real special kind of person because it needs to be instinctive, like you said, Shawn. If it's not, 10, 20 years of training your mind, it's being born with a mind that just like works in that specific way.
Yeah, I feel like being an editor also takes a strong undertone of confidence where you speak with authority as on something that a creative person has kind of poured their heart into, and you're like correcting all of it. So it takes some level of a people person too, I think, to make sure that your ideas are not antagonistic, maybe. But it's an important job for sure. It needs to be done.
And the funny thing for me is Jeremy and Chris joined Darrington Press, and Jeremy is, he started as an editor, and he's been the lead for their rules design for forever. This is like a perfect job for him.
Yeah. It's interesting.
But he's I'm sure he's on a different level than that at Darrington Press with his level of fame in the industry. So when I saw that, I was like, well, I know something that Jeremy's not going to be doing at Darrington Press. It's going to be that.
Yeah, I wonder, would they even hire Jeremy, give him a role, and then immediately do an internal hire for him? No, that doesn't make any sense.
It sounds like, if anything, that would be a promotion for him, and they need to fill the shoes they just bought him for. I don't know.
I know Darrington has some editors that they love, right? There's Navigator, there's Sadie Lowry, there's some Sadie's partner who I've never worked with, so I can't remember their name. Editing partner, that is, not like, partner. They know awesome editors, but again, this isn't a game designer job. This isn't a game editing job. It's a completely different beast. If I had to guess, it would be someone kind of within the Hollywood world that they would be going for.
Yeah. I mean, doing a public hire, though, that you feel like the first wave of checking for this job would be speaking to mutuals and looking if they're looking for work. So that's kind of interesting for them to potentially go both routes.
We will keep an eye on Darrington Press as we keep an eye on Daggerheart. And the last bit of news this week is Gen Con. Gen Con's coming. I feel like Paul Revere, one if by land, two if by sea. Gen Con is coming. Gen Con is coming. Most of us are going by land. Few probably coming by air. Which of us are going to Gen Con?
For the first time in 7 years.
Sweet.
Hey,
Woo!
Congrats. Welcome back. You're going to be hanging
Doing
out at the
anything
booth?
fun that you want to talk about or plug while you have a chance here for Gen Con?
No, I have no idea what I'm doing at Gen Con. I'm going because the stars aligned. I'd love to have something to promote, some sort of stream or product or something like that, but
you're in it for the love of the game.
And for the love of the game, and honestly, to see people. If only the geopolitical situation weren't so fraught right now, we can get the Aussies over here for a full Lorecast panel, but another year.
I was hoping to jump on maybe my first panel, but I missed a couple. I didn't miss windows, but I wasn't elected as, one of the 200,000 white men who are creators. I understand that maybe I don't deserve a pedestal in this moment. Other people definitely deserve to have their voices heard more than an old hat like me, borderline. I will be visiting with a lot of people in the agency that I'm a part of, Wiley Knight. So I'll be talking to, hopefully Crit Crab will be there, a Pointy Hat who exploded into the scene these past couple of years. Just seeing some creator friends. There's Homie and the Dude who have published a bunch of projects. I'm hoping to get a lunch with them and just, visit a lot of friends that I've made throughout the years in this angle and walk the floor a couple times. I'm excited. It'll be fun.
That's awesome.
What have you been up to lately, Logan, anyway?
I've been pushing with a couple of editors recently to shift more toward a bit of a different angle for my channel. I'm working on a little bit of new merch. I'm excited whenever those get released. Hopefully we'll have one design at Gen Con, but we'll see if I barely stepped off the ledge for that window or not. I'm excited. It's a very good illustrator that I've been following for a long time. And hopefully in the fourth quarter this year, I'll be planning to release like bundles of merch. So like you get a t-shirt, you get some dice, and you get a 70-page little one-shot adventure, and pushing through those every 2 or 3 months. So, tiny projects in the works, getting some balls rolling, but nothing crazy.
As someone who once led Fables for Ghostfire, let me tell you about how difficult it is to do a 70-page adventure every couple of months. That's no small task.
Yeah, no.
So good luck.
Build out a team if it's successful and effective. But first, I gotta re-find a good angle for the channel and kind of stop stumbling, start running uphill.
That sounds awesome.
Oh, wow. I also just want to say that I think the best part about Gen Con, that for some reason no one online ever talks about, this is the thing to go check out at Gen Con. There's a hotel attached to the convention center that is also an old railway station, but inexplicably it's full of these creepy statues of people in tableaus as if they have been... it's very Weeping Angels. It's very Doctor Who. So I don't know, go see the creepy statues. And sometimes you'll walk into a room and suddenly it's kind of like an indoor-outdoor, like back rooms situation. It's hard to explain. Go find the creepy statues if you're going to be at Gen Con.
Dael is talking about the Crown Plaza.
Thank you.
Where I have stayed many a time at Gen Con. And it is creepy. And there is a actual train station behind it. So if you're in certain parts of the hotel, don't be surprised if at midnight your room starts shaking like it's an earthquake and it's a train pulling into the station.
Oh my God.
That's cool.
But if you want to go to Gen Con and you haven't bought your badge yet, you better hurry because it was just announced that they are just about sold out of 4-day badges and Saturday only badges. Will be sold out, they say, by leading up to July 31st. And they will sell individual day, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday badges online, but sometimes those sell out as well. And Ghostfire Gaming will be there. We are launching our brand new organized play campaign called The Grim Hunt. Tickets for our launch of this campaign are pretty close to selling out. I think there are 4 events of the several we are running that still have a couple of tickets left. Grab them if you're going to be at Gen Con and want to participate. But if you're not going to Gen Con, have no fear, because the campaign will be coming out for everyone to play. You can play it at home. You can play it online. You can play it at your friendly local gaming store. You can play it at smaller conventions. You will be able to get access to it, and we will be talking more about that in the future. Are you ready for listener questions?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Oh boy, am I.
Oh, okay, Dael, I have a true or false question for you. True or false? To send us an email, you send it to bentalksfunny@ghostfiregaming.com. True or false?
No.
Oh, Shawn, that's false. You should send it to podcast@ghostfiregaming.com.
Oh, you see, extra credit for knowing the correct answer.
Means you get a candy
The
cane
first
after this.
question comes to us from Matt. Matt was very careful to point out that it's not Matt Colville, unless we want to use his thumbnail as clickbait, and then it is from Matt Colville. So,
Thank
hello,
you, Matt.
team. My question is, what do you think the main class fantasy for other D&D core classes should be? Is it all right if a subclass's fantasy cannibalizes a broader class fantasy? And if you want to get spicy, here's another question. What should the 5e Rangers class fantasy be? A druid subset, a fighter subset, the pet class? I am going to step back, and this is why I asked that question at the start about the monster types being the iconic things. So what do we think about Matt, not Colville's question?
What do we think?
I feel like we talked about this recently, so I'm trying to make sure I don't repeat myself here.
Repeat yourself. Indulge.
Let me ask you a clarifying question here.
Sure.
Is Matt, not Colville, asking us about what we think the class fantasy for every core class ought to be? Because that's a big question.
Yeah. He outlined other.
I think what Matt, not Colville, is asking is what should it be and how much crossover should be allowed before you're stepping on someone else's territory.
Where's the crossover point? If you play pop folk music, at what point do you cross over into folk pop instead?
Is the game better off by allowing that crossover? I'm going to throw my own questions in here.
Yeah.
Is the game better off for allowing that crossover? Or would it be better if you were the fighter, you did the fighting? If you were the rogue, you did the sneaking. If you were the cleric, you did the healy, turny undead sort of thing.
Also, I think it might be helpful. We had a conversation earlier before the podcast recording today about what does class fantasy mean, and I think James had a really good sort of explanation of that. I'd love that. I'd love if you would share that with our audience, James.
Yeah. Okay. So class fantasy, I don't know where the term came from, but I first heard it when I was playing a lot of World of Warcraft. In Legion, there were these like guild halls for every single class in the game. And the WoW developers talked a lot about nailing the class fantasy through location. So to my mind, anyway, class fantasy it's the core archetype of what you're playing. Like for a paladin, what's the core narrative of being a paladin? It's about protecting people and about being a paragon of justice. It might have a sort of aesthetic class fantasy, which is heavy armor and maybe holy glow, sort of the sheen around your blade when you prepare a smite. And so you've got aesthetic ideas. You've got narrative ideas of what kind of adventures does this class really thrive in when it goes out and plays, and what mechanics have the developers given you to help you live that out in a direct, meaningful way. So that's what we mean when we talk about class fantasy. It's the archetype.
I would almost, from my perspective, I think it's best if you're trying to make a character that you want to resonate with or a fantasy that you want to live out. Start with that and then move on to what class resonates with whatever you're trying to accomplish the most. So I wouldn't like slot everything into this big sort of like sorting hat bubble of, oh, well, this character works best with this class, this works best with this. I feel like if you really, really want to, you can make just about anything work. And for me, at least in my experience, the less it works, the more fun trying to live out that fantasy becomes.
Yeah, this is something I've noticed, especially in D&D when you've got a lot of creativity in your player base, is that taking an idea and intentionally subverting it is the fantasy for a lot of people, right? I've got a friend in my Witherwild campaign for Daggerheart who is playing a ranger, but wants to play it in the most paladin-like way possible, right? So how can you take their ranger class and make it feel like you're embodying the class fantasy of a paladin? There are totally people who use like monk to embody what they feel a rogue ought to be because they feel the mechanics of the class serve their image of the roguish archetype better. And it's just more fun because it feels like you're kind of breaking something. You're getting away with something when you do it.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because we're talking about essentially when we make classes for a game, often that is taking archetypes that exist in storytelling and trying to give them representation mechanically. And we try to cover a lot of bases when we do that. And sometimes it's really broad. The fighter, guy who fights. Versus, the spellcaster gets broken down into some very specific types of spellcasting. Are you a spellcaster who wants to read your book every night and rememorize spells? Or are you a spellcaster who just kind of does it on a whim, but it's a little bit chaotic? Like it gets much more granular in terms of difference on the spellcaster end versus the fighter end, for example. And then as you're talking about, you could have archetypes that are not necessarily represented. Your archetype could be, I want to be like a gunslinger cowboy. I want to ride in on my horse with my 6-shooter and do my thing. So then what class mechanically best suits that? Are you going to be a fighter? Are you going to be a ranger? Are you going to be a paladin? When you're playing a paladin, as James is saying now, if you want to sort of mess around with that archetype, what is a paladin without an oath? What does that look like? What makes a paladin without an oath different from a fighter? These are all the kind of questions that start bubbling away. And as Roman brings up in chat, our class fantasy is different for everyone, or at least different culturally. And I think that's the thing, is that we're playing in a sandbox of cultural consciousness where we have kind of agreed on horizons of expectation when we're talking about these archetypes, but the edges get fuzzy. And everyone is going to have slightly different edges and slightly different centers to those. And that becomes a real point of difficulty when you are designing a game with that kind of intention. I do think there is a valuable difference between multi-classing and going, I want to be a fighter with a little bit of magic in it versus being I don't know, like an Eldritch Knight is different to a wizard fighter. Does that make sense? Like being a spell sword can mean a different thing to a different person, and those mechanically support that in different ways. And one might support your fantasy better than the other.
It's why I talked about the other week about when I want a Gish class for it not just to be you get fighting abilities and you get traditional spellcasting. I want them to be unified into, you know, a flaming strike or a lightning teleport or something that feels martial. Because if I wanted to, because it tells a different story, right? It tells a story of an integrated, unique fighting style. Whereas if I was a fighter who took a dip level in Wizard, I'd have these sort of like tricks, right? There's a narrative presented by just taking a dip level in one class, because I want to be like, oh, well, yeah, my character studied for about 3 weeks or something and picked up a couple of cantrips, and that's not the core of their identity, but it's something they've got in their back pocket, you know, in case things get bad.
Does subclasses then trample, as we said before, on other archetypes that someone else is coming up with, not you? I've got so many questions right now. I'm trying to sort them all out in my head.
Like if someone is playing a druid and they want the druid fantasy, does it then step on toes to have the nature cleric also there in the same party?
Yes. Drives me crazy.
And right. The cleric was the first one when they really started digging in like Dragon Magazine to say, well, you're a cleric, but you're a cleric of the trickster god, so therefore you have all these rogue abilities. The rogues were like, wait, now you can do everything I can do and you can heal. What's going on here?
There's no bit of cross-contamination that drives me crazier than in 3rd edition when there was a spell called Rage, which gave you a barbarian's rage. It's like, why? What are we doing here? Mm-hmm.
I think that just comes to party communication. You're fine to overlap levels of fantasy as long as you're not trying to make the same character with 2 different classes. And that's where a lot of communication, like in session 0 or whatever, happens. And I remember I had this issue in one party where I described this character and like his rules and his ideals, and someone else had something adjacent with, and we were like, oh yeah, I'm playing a rogue, and like I'm playing a cleric or a ranger. And the entire time we were trying to do the same thing. And we both had very similar roll bonuses. So it was like, what's the point of the difference? Like, should one of us leave and reset? And so it definitely becomes a very prevalent problem.
And I mean, ideally, you will be performing well in slightly different areas. Like you can both be really good at your, stealth missions. But then when it comes to fighting, it'll look different, or, you'll find different avenues, but it doesn't always work out that way. And I mean, I think this is part of why the Ranger comes up anytime the question of class fantasy is brought up, is because in many ways, the Ranger continuously ends up being Druid, but worse. And I think that's interesting because, I mean, to me, everyone is going to have a slightly different class fantasy. To me, the Ranger's sort of pocket lives in the realm of the hunter. Yes, they can navigate the wilderness, but they are a supreme hunter. They are not necessarily a friend of the wilderness. They have tamed the wilderness in a way that druids work with it or try to protect it, right? So that's a point of difference for me, but not everyone agrees on that. And it seems like the official direction with Rangers is that they are more a protector of the wilds, which puts them firmly in the same class fantasy as a druid. And then that becomes a problem because the druid also gets spells and gets to turn into a beast. And then in some game, in Pathfinder, you can have your beast companion. You get all these fun little things that the ranger either just also gets or gets but worse or doesn't get. And it really does become, and it makes me think every single time of in the first campaign of Critical Role, when Sam showed up with Taryn Darrington, who to me, maybe this is not the case, but to me that very much looked like a sick prank by Sam Riegel to come in with a character who was better at everyone else's like key thing than they were. You know, he's a better tinkerer than Percy. He's got a better companion than Vex does. All those sorts of things. And it is kind of exploitable in that way, but it's also something that you can accidentally do to ruffle feathers. But you're right, Logan. It's so much of it comes down to party communication, and can you hack being at a table with someone else who is also good at your specialty?
Yeah, right. The value of these classes that have one foot in one world and one foot in another is that when you don't have a druid in your party and you don't have a fighter in your party, a ranger is great to have, right? You want both of those.
It almost feels like, the way that you're describing it, it feels like a great fix for smaller parties where you're allowed to dip your toes in two different pools as long as no one else is trying to soak in them. Make sure that you're not muddying everyone else's water.
Right. So it becomes a communication thing. And ultimately, right, it lives in a weird place in a game with multi-classing. If D&D didn't have multi-classing even as an optional rule, then I'm not sure we'd be having this conversation.
Does an archetype change over time? Because when original D&D came out, right, the archetype for Fancy and Magic was Jack Vance's novels. The Barbarian was Conan. The Ranger was all the Rangers from Lord of the Rings. Have things changed now? Are we still clinging to those old archetypes, those old iconic versions of things? And is it in conflict with the newer archetypes that newer generations of players are more familiar with?
I think we're in the midst of kind of a soft civil war where things are changing. A lot of people are much more comfortable going with those kind of old standards and in no derogatory way stereotypes because they enjoy these types of stories being told. And then you have more explorative people who want more narrative and less combat focused stories to be told. They want their parties and their characters to have these mixes and mingles and emotional conflicts, which could eventually lead into our next question.
It's also such an interesting thing to bring up because I think a lot of the problems that arise as a result of, you know, we talk about D&D specifically as a 3-pillar game, but in play, one of those pillars comes up a lot more than the other ones. And so if you have a ranger who, I mean, seemingly a lot of their stuff should be coming up in the exploration pillar, but if you're playing a game where you don't really engage with the exploration pillar, that's a problem because it means that now you are only ever matching up.
It's a two-legged game.
It's a two-legged game. And you know, you try to have some classes like a bard in many ways is supposed to be sort of a jack of all trades. It's in one of the ability names, a jack of all trades, a master of none, but they kind of just end up being a master of all of them. And then what's the point of bringing anyone else along to be a skill monkey when the bard's got it covered? Plus spells. Exactly. It relies on the game being played as intended rather than, you know, those paths that, what's the name for it? Those photos of when, you know, they've built an area and there are paths everywhere, but people just walk across the grass.
It's a desire path.
A desire path. It's the desire paths of game design.
Are there any archetypes that D&D has not successfully captured in terms of player choices for classes?
Well, setting aside science fiction, right? Archetypes beyond the genre of D&D's core proficiency. I don't have a follow-up. I'm just setting that ground rule.
Yeah. We were waiting for the big reveal there.
No big reveal.
Even though the Artificer came out and it lends itself heavily to your character being an inventor, someone who is able to create a lot of these ideas and watch sort of this, what's the name for those machines that tumble 16 times into themselves before a marble falls?
Oh, Rube Goldberg.
Yeah, you want to make these kind of Rube Goldberg machines, but the Artificer is a little rigid and it's a little restrictive when it comes to what you're allowed to create. And I feel like D&D, which is a game all about coming up with unique solutions and coming up with all these amazing things, there's not really any reliable way to make traps or make little inventions or slingshots or anything that you as your character can benefit from in any reliable way that's ever been outlined. So I don't think
I agree. And I also think they make it too magical.
They do, because you just use spells and you just reskin them, which I could do if I played a wizard. I could be an artificer like that just by telling you that I'm an artificer and playing a wizard.
Completely agree.
Other archetypes that especially newer ones that we've seen in new media and new pop culture that haven't been. I'm asking as the old dude who doesn't watch all the new anime and so on. It's funny you said Artificer, because we've seen a lot of third-party content, Alchemist, right? Those sorts of things. When you see that, that's when you say, this is where D&D hasn't quite caught up to what the zeitgeist is with a percentage of the player base.
I want to talk about the sort of the modern Japanese media action fighter, this sort of lithe, lanky speedster that often winds up mid-air with their opponents, right? Almost juggling foes in mid-air with sword swings in a way that defies all laws of physics on multiple fronts, right? Not just they are not slicing their foe in half with their sharp weapon, but also, defying gravity and stuff like that.
Like Smash Bros. Juggling. Or like Dante.
Totally. But you look at Nier Automata or Jujutsu Kaisen, or even like older anime like Bleach or something like that, where Cloud from Final Fantasy, a game from the 90s, was doing this sort of thing. This sort of like
floater.
Yeah, this sort of keepy-uppy sort of thing.
The keepy-uppy.
Yeah. where they move with a speed that boggles the eye with a weapon, and they just burn someone down, right? Monk kind of gets there. I think Bladesinger kind of gets there, but there's this je ne sais quoi that I've never seen D&D able to capture of that character.
I feel similarly about witches, like as in brew a potion, like practical magic almost style witches, right? I feel like there's a hankering for that. People sort of try their hand at it from time to time. I've tried my hand at it. I think sometimes the Warlock tries to get there, but never quite can. That's one for me, which came to mind when James said defying gravity. Yeah.
I had the idea before someone put it in chat, but I was genuinely thinking, in One Piece, out of all the Straw Hats, who can I not play? And a cook is something that D&D has never fully committed to the idea of, which is similar to witchcraft in a light sense, where you have to collect ingredients and prepare them effectively to augment people in the future. And use these like pre-packaged things that you did spend some time creating and collecting to sling out during combat. And that's not...
Cook is the class. The subclasses are witch, alchemist, chef.
I made that actually in like a Patreon 4 years ago as a cook achievement class. We need that.
There's even a cook feat in Tasha's and in the new player's handbook.
A baker, maybe a candlestick.
A family maker.
Only if you eat candlesticks. Well, we're going to get to one more question because this sort of ties what we've been talking about maybe into a nice little bow. Adam asks, I've noticed that there's a trend in our industry of designing things to be compatible with or resemble old solutions, likely because familiar things sell better, but I believe that there's a goldmine of best practices from user experience research, instructional design principles, or project management methodologies, etc., that could skyrocket TTRPG industries, yet we're hesitant to change. So the question, what outdated solutions or design principles do you wish the TTRPG industry would move on from?
The idea of permanence. I'm not a huge fan of when you're growing as a character or collecting magic items that you are entitled permanently to the abilities that you collect, to the items that regain their charges at dawn. I think your character should be, or your experience should be more fluid and grow in an unpredictable way where sacrifice is part of the adventure. It's a loose concept. But.
I wasn't sure I was with you when you started talking, but I was with you by the end. Absolutely. You look at the stories that all this stuff comes from, the loss of possessions, whether it's myth or modern fantasy, I mean, it defines these characters.
One little example, actually, I just finished for the first time, and I didn't know there was a movie about it by the time I finished the book, The Phantom Tollbooth. He collects gifts from each of these characters up until he enters this danger zone. And the whole idea of surviving danger is sacrifices that you've made along the way. You don't get to keep everything, And everything he has is little one uses, but they help him fight these concepts in very specific ways. And I think that lends itself to the growth of a character and the story as a whole, or the adventure rather.
In the game, The Wild Sea by MythWorks, which I played for the first time this weekend, when you take damage, you don't have a hit point stat or something that you mark away at. You instead have these aspects, which are kind of your items and your class features and your species traits, all kind of categorized into a single thing. And all these aspects have little dots that can be marked away. And when you mark off the last dot of an aspect, you no longer can use it until you manage to clear all of its marks. And I think that's a way to do what we're talking about here.
One way, I don't want to dominate this question, but just to end this thought, I have been a big fan of City of Mist, which is, a very strong system. And they recently released Legends in the Mist, which I am super excited about. But the whole way that you play a character is you have 4 different aspects of a character, and the less you use an aspect of your character, the more you burn it away. And if you burn it away enough, you lose that whole card, you lose that part of your identity and replace it with what you've been pursuing that opposes it. And that's how your character grows. It's a constant loss and growth system, and I'm a big fan of that.
Cool.
One of the greatest things I hear people say if they're talking about an adventure or something they've played that I've written is, I had my character plan from levels 1 to 20, but because of the choices my character had to make in your adventure, I'm now taking that character on a completely different path.
Yes.
And I think that's great as a game master, as a player who's in a particular story. I think that's great. And I think that goes, Logan, to sort of what you're talking about a little bit in terms of changing. I think that the community as a whole, majority might be too strong, but at least a large minority are the people that go on to D&D Beyond and they build their characters levels 1 to 20. And if you took that ability away from them in the game rules themselves, there would be a rebellion. And that goes to Adam's question of why aren't there more innovations, especially within like D&D itself? And the answer is it's a self-selecting customer base. They do what they like, and they like what they like, and they're going to continue to like what they like, and you can't change that.
That's a very good term for that. Self-selecting.
It's so interesting. So many of these, I'm not sure whether mine, at first I thought that mine had more to do with hit points and being sick of hit points as a measure of how you take damage. But as you all have been talking, I've started to realize that maybe it's more to do with growth being a result of success. Because I do agree. I love when a system toys with that. I love Marvel heroic role playing, where as you make difficult choices in character, that's how your character grows and gains new experience and abilities. I love in I'm just thinking, yes, City of Mist, yes, the playbook style games where by failing you gain experience and you develop, and any system that does that same thing, but in terms of measuring injuries or character failure without hit points, even within combat, I find really, really interesting. And I wish that we would see more of those kinds of innovations throughout game design, throughout the industry. And then I just had another thing I was going to say that completely left my brain.
You sacrificed it for character growth.
I did. I sacrificed it for character growth.
That was...
Oh, no, I remembered. Oh, sorry. It's because I covered it up. It's because I was thinking of this. Yeah, hold your hands in the sky. Put them up. No, sorry. There's a computer game called Slice and Dice. Dungeon crawler style, pixelated. Like it's this super simple game that I play when my brain is doing two things at once. But there's a really interesting design element to that, which is that as your character reaches level up and they sort of gain a level in whatever their class is, so you start out with, I don't know, some base level of like a fighter or something. They're not literally called a fighter, but, just imagine that for a minute. And then when they level up, there's like 6 different level 2 versions of what they could be. But it randomly gives you the choice between 2. And you don't know what that choice is going to be. And that's kind of fascinating. In the moment, you have to go, which one am I picking for this character? Or there is a random, you can choose to randomly determine what they're going to be, but it takes away that element of, I know exactly what the path is, and forces it to be more in the moment, and sort of, I don't know, nebulous in a way that I think is interesting, and I would be interested to see applied to game design for tabletop.
That sort of randomized approach works so well for games where you can throw a character away at a moment's notice and your gameplay is fast and zippy. I say great for an OSR dungeon crawler, less good for a game where you've got a character in mind you're going to build out a whole story based on it. Or maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the traditional rhythm isn't correct. I'd love to see it happen.
With that final thought, we have to get out of here. But I have been Shawn Merwin here with Dael Kingsmill, Logan Reese, James Hake. Thank you all for listening. We are doing this live every Monday night at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, or Tuesday morning, 9 a.m. over there in that other place that we call the Land Down Under.
Yeah, on the East Coast, we don't talk about Perth.
That's true. Even people in Australia don't know what time it is in Perth, including people from Perth, I hear. But with that, we thank you again for listening, likes and thumbs and stars and stuff, as they say, and we will catch you next time on the Eldritch Lorecast. That's how we summon Dante. It's the call.
It's
Dante's a flower pot man.
Horn of Yggdrasil. Or forget the name of the horn. What is that horn?
The yellow horn?
The Skjall horn?
That might be it.